And so, okay, so why is it these people who were, this is so awful, I didn't know that were, say, part of this safety and trust issue at Twitter, who are now training the bloody AIs? How did that horrible situation come to be?
It's the same dynamic. It's the big AI companies have the exact same dynamic as the big social media companies, which have the exact same dynamic as the big universities, which have the exact same dynamic as the big media companies, which is you have these either formal or de facto cartels. You have a small handful of companies at the commanding heights of society that hire all the smart graduates. As I say, take a step back. You don't see ideological competition between Harvard and Yale, right? Like, you would think that you should, because they should compete in the marketplace of ideas. And of course, in practice, you don't see that at all. You see no ideological, competition between the New York Times and the Washington Post. You see no ideological competition between the Ford Foundation and any of the other major foundations. They all have the exact same politics. You see no, prior to Elon buying Twitter, you saw no ideological competition between the different social media companies. Right today, you see no ideological competition among the big AI labs. Elon is the spoiler, right? He is coming in to do he's going to try to do in AI what he did in social media, which is create the non-woke one. But without Elon, you weren't seeing that at all. And so you have this consistent dynamic across these sectors of what appears to be a free market economy, where you end up with these cartels, where they sort of self-reinforce and self-police, and then they're policed by the government. Anyway, so I want to describe the general phenomenon, because that's what's happening here. It's the same thing that happened with the social media companies, and then this gets into policy it's into very serious policy issues on the government side, which is the government going to grant these AI companies basically protected status as some form of monopoly or cartel in return for these companies signing up for the political control that their masters in government want, or in the alternative is there actually going to be an open AI universe, a true open AI, like truly open, where you're going to have a multiplicity of AIs that are actually in full competition, right, competing, and then you'll have some that are woke, and you'll have some that are non-woke, and you'll have some trained on new material and some trained on old material, and so forth and so on, and then people can freely pick. And the thing that we're pushing for is that latter outcome. We very specifically want government to not protect these companies, to not put them behind a regulatory wall, to not be able to control them in the way that the social media companies got controlled before Elon. We actually want like full competition. And if you want your woke AI, you can have it, but there are many other choices.
Well, can you imagine developing a super intelligence that's shielded from evolutionary pressure? Like, that is absolutely insane. That's absolutely insane. I mean, we know that the only way that a complex system can regulate itself across time is through something like evolutionary competition. That's it. That's the mechanism. And so if you decide that this AI is correct by fiat, and then you shield it from any possibility of market feedback or environmental feedback, well, that is literally the definition of how to make something insane. And so now you talked about, in some of your recent podcasts, you talked about the fact that the Biden administration in particular, if I got this right, was conspiring behind the scenes with the tech companies to cordon off the AI systems and make them monolithic. And so can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so this is this whole dispute that's playing out, and this gets complicated, but I'll try to provide a high-level view. So this is a whole dispute of what's so-called AI safety. Right. And so there's this whole kind of, you might call it concern or even panic about, like, are the AIs going to run out of control? Are they going to kill us all? Right. By the way, are they going to be racist? All these different concerns over, all the different ways in which these things can go wrong. There's this attempt to impose the precautionary principle on these AIs, where you have to prove that they're harmless before they're allowed to be released, which inherently gets into these political questions. And so anyway, the AI safety movement conjoins a lot of these questions into kind of this overall kind of elevated level of concern. And then basically what has been happening is the major AI labs, basically they know what the deal is. They watch what happened in social media. They watch what happened to the companies that got out of line. They watch the pressures that came to bear. They watch what the government did to the social media companies. They watch the censorship regime that was put in place, which was very much a political, top-down censorship regime. And basically they went to Washington over the course of the last several years, and they essentially proposed a trade. And the trade was, we will do what you want politically. We will come under your control voluntarily from a political standpoint, the same way the social media companies had. And in return for that, we essentially want a cartel. We want a regulatory structure set up such that a small handful of big companies will be able to succeed in effect forever, and then new entrants will not be allowed to compete. And in Washington, they understand this because this is the classic economic concept of regulatory capture. This is what every set of major big companies in every industry does. And so the AI companies went to Washington and they tried to do that. And basically what was happening up until the election was the Biden administration was on board with that. And that led to the conversations that I've talked about before that we had in the spring with the Biden administration, where they told us very directly, senior officials in the administration told us very directly, look, do not even bother to try to fund AI startups. There are only going to be 2 or 3 large AI companies building 2 or 3 large AIs, and we are going to control them. We are going to set up a system in which we control them, and they are going to be, they're not going to be nationalized, but they're going to be essentially de facto integrated into the government. And we are going to do whatever is required to guarantee that outcome, and it's the only way to get to the outcome that we will find acceptable.
Okay. Well, so there's so much in there that's pathological beyond comprehension that it's difficult to even know where to start. It's like, who the hell thinks this is a good idea, and why? Like, who are these people that feel that they're in a position to determine the face of hyperintelligence, of computational hyperintelligence? And who is it that thinks that that is something that should be like regulated by a closed government corporate cartel? Like, I don't understand that at all, Mark. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody detail out to me something that is so blatantly both malevolent and insane simultaneously. So, like, how do you account for that? I mean, I know it shocked you. I know that's why you've been talking about it recently. Now, it should shock you because it's just beyond comprehension to me that this sort of thing can go on, and thank God you're bringing it to light. But, like, how do you make sense of this? What's your understanding of it?
Well, look, it's the same people who think that they should control the education system, same people who think they should control the universities, same people who think they should control social media censorship. The same people who think that they should permanently control the government bureaucracies. It's this, pick whatever term you want. It's this elite class, ruling class, oligarchic
Worshippers
class.
of power. Remember, it's one ring of power that binds all the evil rings. Yeah, right. Well, it's worshippers of power. And the damn postmodernists, when they proclaimed that power was the only game in town, a huge part of that was both a confession and an ambition. Right. If power is the only game in town, then why not be the most effective power player?
The reason I'm so sensitized to this is because this is exactly what I saw happen with social media censorship. Like, I sat in the room and watched the construction of the entire social media censorship edifice every step of the way, going all the way back to I was in the original discussions about what defines concepts like hate speech and misinformation. Like, I was in those meetings and I saw the construction of the entire private sector edifice that resulted in the censorship regime that we all experienced. And I was close into there's a whole group at Stanford University that became a censorship bureau that was working on behalf of the government. I know those people. One of the people who ran that used to work for me. I know exactly who those people are. I know exactly how that program worked. I knew the people in government, who were running things like this, the so-called Global Engagement Center and all these different arms of the government that have been imposing social media censorship. So this is this entire complex that we kind of saw unspooled in the Twitter files, and then we've seen in the investigative reporting by people like Mike Benz and Mike Schellenberger and these other guys. Like, I saw that whole thing get built, and I over the course of basically 12 years, I saw that whole thing get built, and then of course I've been part of Elon's takeover of Twitter, and so I've seen what it takes to try to unwind that with what he's doing at X. And so I feel like I saw the first movie, right? And then AI, AI is a much more important, as I said, AI is a much more important topic, but AI is very clearly the sequel to that. And what I'm seeing is basically the exact same pattern that I saw with that. And the people who were able to do that for social media for a long time are the same kind of people, and in many cases, literally the same people who are now trying to do that in AI. And so at this point, I feel like we've been warned. Like, we've seen the first movie, we've been warned, we've seen how bad it can get. We need to make sure it doesn't happen again. And yeah, we need, those of us in a position to be able to do something about it need to talk about it and need to try to prevent it.